So, on this Easter weekend, I thought it would be interesting to explore these two sections from A Course in Miracles that come sequentially one after the other. Number 27 from the Manual for Teachers, What is Death? And number 28, What is the Resurrection? To highlight the extreme example, undeniable example of the death and resurrection of Christ. So, number 27, what is death? Dum dum dum. What is death? Death is the central dream from which all illusions stem. A dream of death from which all illusions stem. Is it not madness to think of life as being born, aging, losing vitality, and dying in the end? We have asked this question before, but now we need to consider it more carefully. It is the one fixed, unchangeable belief of the world that all things in it are born only to die. This is regarded as the way of nature, not to be raised to question, but to be accepted as the natural law of life, the cyclical, the changing and unsure, the undependable and the unsteady, waxing and waning in a certain way upon a certain path. All this is taken as the will of God, and no one asks if a benign creator could will this. In this perception of the universe as God created it, it would be impossible to think of him as loving. For who has decreed that all things pass away, ending in dust and disappointment and despair, can but be feared? He holds your little life in his hand, but by a thread, ready to break it off without regret or care, perhaps today, or if he waits, yet is the ending certain. Who loves such a God knows not love, because he has denied that life is real. Death has become life's symbol. His world is now a battleground, where contradiction reigns, and opposites make endless war. Where there is death, is peace impossible. So, highlighting that the cyclical, changeful birth and death cycle is not reality with a capital R, and is not the eternal, loving will of God. If God created death, then fear becomes very justified. But luckily, this is not so. So let's read on. Death is the symbol of the fear of God. His love is blotted out in the idea, which holds it from awareness like a shield, held up to obscure the sun. The grimness of the symbol is enough to show it cannot coexist with God. It holds an image of the Son of God in which he is laid to rest in devastation's arms, where worms wait to greet him and to last a little while by his destruction. Yet the worms as well are doomed to be destroyed as certainly, and so do all things live because of death. Devouring is nature's law of life. God is insane, and fear alone is real. So again, this sort of highlighting that the world as we've taken it is terrifying. The dream we've believed in is terrifying, and we often sugarcoat it and glaze it with honey and look everywhere to not see that the core of what we've believed this world is death, temporariness, and the ultimate destruction of all things. The curious belief that there is part of dying things that may go on apart from what will die does not proclaim a loving God, nor reestablish any grounds for trust. If death is real for anything, there is no life. Death denies life. But if there is reality in life, death is denied. No compromise in this is possible. There is either a God of fear or one of love. The world attempts 1,000 compromises and will attempt 1,000 more. Not one can be acceptable to God's teachers because not one could be acceptable to God. He did not make death because he did not make fear. Both are equally meaningless to him. So death comes not from a loving creator. Here we're asked to take responsibility for the belief in fear and death, that it's an idea, an interpretation that comes from a fearful mind, a mind that believes in guilt and separation, and not from the love that is our source. So any belief in death proposes separation from love. And we have to become so willing to become responsible for our investment in that belief. And that responsibility puts the power back in our hands to choose again, to choose to see ourselves as we truly are, one with the eternal, one with the divine, having never left that. And death is this sort of accentuation point where both the ego finds its linchpin, but also the place where the ego's illusion collapses if we can look at it directly without fear. We can say, "O death, where is thy sting?" Only from love can we see that clearly. A love that is not conditional upon perception, but just is, regardless of what's perceptually appearing. The reality of death is firmly rooted in the belief that God's Son is a body. And if God created bodies, death would indeed be real, but God would not be loving. There is no point at which the contrast between the perception of the real world and that of the world of illusions becomes more sharply evident. Death is indeed the death of God, if he is love. And now his own creation must stand in fear of him. He is not father, but destroyer. He is not creator, but avenger. Terrible his thoughts, and fearful his image. To look on his creations is to die. So this is again highlighting, if the ego's premises are true, then God should indeed be feared. And within the ego thought system, of course, love is feared. It is seen as death because it's seen to be wanting to take away this false image of ourself that we have equated with life. Everything is upside down in the ego's perception. It clings to its images, but its images guarantee death. So this is this choice point. Death is this place where loyalty to one or the other thought system is demanded. And the last to be overcome will be death, of course, Without the idea of death, there is no world. All dreams will end with this one. This is salvation's final goal, the end of all illusions. And in death are all illusions born. What can be born of death and still have life? But what is born of God and still can die? The inconsistencies, the compromises, and the rituals the world fosters in its vain attempts to cling to death, and yet to think love real, are mindless magic, ineffectual and meaningless. God is, and in him all created things must be eternal. Do you not see that otherwise he has an opposite, and fear would be as real as love? So, God can have no opposite, being eternal, being infinite, being all encompassing. If death is real, then we're proposing that there is an opposite of God, and we are lost in a dream of opposites and opposition and a never ending battle between good and evil. This is not the will of an eternal, loving creator. And we have never left the abode of peace and the abode of love. And from here, we are asked to look on all things equally. There is, of course, a perceptual play of life and death, but we have the ability to look on all of it from love, to make everything the same in love, to digest all false meaning out of appearances, and reinstate the loving interpretation that there is no death. Teacher of God, your one assignment could be stated thus: accept no compromise in which death plays a part. Do not believe in cruelty, nor let attack conceal the truth from you. What seems to die has but been misperceived and carried to illusion. Now it becomes your task to let the illusions be carried to the truth. Be steadfast but in this: be not deceived by the reality of any changing form. So we see the changeful from the changeless, knowing, continuously rooting into the changeless, letting the changeful highlight what is not changing, letting it highlight our true relationship with Spirit. Truth neither moves, nor wavers, nor sinks down to death and dissolution. And what is the end of death? Nothing but this: the realization that the Son of God is guiltless, now and forever. Nothing but this. But do not let yourself forget, it is not less than this. So it's a simple truth. We are eternal. It's neither more nor less than that, the truth. But we allow those dreams of to be brought to truth, forgiveness of what never happened. And the extreme example of Christ on the cross, knowing that life is never threatened by the changes of a dream of death. Offering loving salvation, even as the body is destroyed. I tell you the truth, you shall be with me in eternity this day. So, what was killed when Christ was crucified? Nothing but illusion. So, this extreme example, although Jesus' words could be misconstrued, this extreme example was very hard to misunderstand. Not that the ego hasn't tried, but still, this extreme example of the crucifixion for 2,000 years, it must be reckoned with, at least. And so, tomorrow, I'll read the next section. What is the resurrection? They're two parts of the same coin. What is death? What is the resurrection? The death part seems a little heavier, but that's just because we've believed in illusion of fear. They both tell the same story. This undeniable example of the resurrection, the crucifixion and the resurrection, that what is real can never be threatened, and what is unreal never exists. So thank you for joining me here, and I'm going to sign off now. Bye-bye.